Okay, One Piece chapter 1018 is out, and it's a lot of momentum that we had from the last chapter with the Gomu Gomu no Mi and everything that transpired with that. That, for a while, I think it broke the community. Like, everybody was talking about it. People that hadn't read One Piece in a while, right? They were like, okay, what's going on? What do I need to know? Because the Gomu Gomu no Mi, when Luffy's involved, a lot of people are involved, right? A lot of people are talking, clamoring, and then it encapsulated so much information, lore, where you had to go back to the beginning of the story, go back to different arcs to piece things together to try to discern what's going on with the Gomu Gomu no Mi. So this chapter was somewhat of a continuation of that because it continued with the who's who stuff, but it deviated and it gave us some information or a specific thing that I think a lot of people are going to be talking about this week. But first, what I want you guys to talk about in the comment section is subscribing to the channel. If you have not subscribed, do so right now. Drop a like as well, because we will be talking about this chapter, because a lot transpired, even though the chapter, it seemed like it flew by, but this is one of those chapters in which it's a lot of action, right? It's a fight going on, but we did get some important dialogue, some important and key story progression, because I think it's pretty clear where we're going from here. But let's start with Tama. So at first, I was hoping that this entire thing with Tama was over, meaning this whole plot point of Tama converting people, right? Because this is something that had been hinted about from the beginning of Wano, right? That Tama could turn people, turn smile users. It was like, okay, obviously Tama's going to be used against Kaido. So Tama's turning a bunch of people. I didn't expect to get updates this quickly, right? Because last chapter, they told us what was happening with Tama. This chapter, they're telling us the outcome of what happened. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. We'll talk about CP0 really quickly, but Tama and Nami and Usopp, they're kind of driving the point home that, hey, Tama, your ability is really amazing. Like, you're converting all these people. We saw Speed, we saw Gazelle Man, we even saw Daifugo. So we're seeing all the people that Tama turned kind of come around and help them. And then CP0 kind of gave us the macro or the outside perspective, the larger perspective of how this impacts the fight. In 1016, it was 20,000 versus 7,000. Now where we're at, based on what Tama has done, because she's converted 300 headliners, right? People with smile powers. We're currently at 16,000 versus 9,000, because those numbers are going down rapidly. So those 300 headliners, they had 2,000 people follow them. And because of that, that led to 2,000 casualties. So that brings us to where we are now. This battle is turning people. Now, CP0, what is their purpose? That's something that we've asked the entire time they've been here. Are they going to help Orochi? Are they going to help Kaido? Are they going to do something to Kaido after he's defeated? CP0 finally revealed what their purpose was in Wano. The entire reason why they're in Wano is to confirm the death of Who's Who. Who's Who being the former operative, the former CP9 agent who they failed to apprehend. So something they also mentioned is that they really don't care who wins, right? The victory is of no consequence to them, which is a bit odd considering what we found out in the last chapter. But then things would kind of make sense, because they said, hey, the things that Who's Who mentioned, it's kind of dated, right? Things that he's saying is based on things that happened back then. So then I'm like, okay, is Luffy's devil fruit really that important? But then those things did happen. Shanks did go and take this devil fruit from Who's Who, and this chapter confirmed it was actually Shanks who went to the ship and took the devil fruit, right? When we say Shanks and his affiliates, right? Before we talk about what Who's Who said, I gotta say CP0 being on Who's Who's trail, it seems a bit trivial, right? But I understand it. He's a CP9 agent, a rogue CP9 agent. They have to set a precedent, right? We can't have an agent who knows so much escape and run away and live to tell a story. So I get why they're on his trail and why they feel like they have to take him out right now, but it seems like they could be doing a lot more important things, right? I think the revolutionaries, well, you know what? Based on this Vivid card and these bounties, I don't know anymore. But you would think they would be after revolutionaries, people that could have a severe impact on the world, but they're after Who's Who. Again, Who's Who knows pertinent information, and we're going to transition into that. And he knows things that could impact the world. I mean, what they feel like could impact the world. But I gotta say, shout out to them, because they gave my boy Jinbei some credit, right? They said, Who's Who? How do we even know he's going to survive? He is fighting Jinbei after all, right? Which is praising Jinbei, a former warlord of the sea. And I think Jinbei does not get enough credit. I think Jinbei has proven himself time and time again as a combatant, as a leader, as a subordinate, as a friend, and does not get enough credit and respect and even recognition. So I'm here today. To give Jinbei that respect, that recognition, that credit, and say, Jinbei, I appreciate you. Right? You've shown your loyalty, your bravado, your smarts, your skills in so many different situations. And this chapter, I think dedicating this chapter almost, Who's Who versus Jinbei, where Jinbei, after fighting all these grunts, right? While fighting these grunts and fighting Who's Who, is whooping Who's Who's ass. So at this point, I mean, listen, he's one of the best. We can't deny that anymore. You have nothing bad that you can say about Jinbei anymore at this point. I mean, even before then, there was nothing bad you could say about him or should be saying about him. So shout out to Jinbei, man. This chapter really wanted to drive that home because he did a spectacular job here, but not only here. Every time he's on screen, he does something substantial. So shout out to him. In regards to the fight, right? The dialogue around the fight, I think, is probably a bit more interesting. Even though the fight was interesting, because of what Who's Who said in the last chapter, I'm like, okay, Who's Who, what more do you know? What more can you tell me about what's going on with the Gomu Gomu no Mi, Joy Boy, and in this chapter, the Sun God, but we'll get to that. Who's Who confirms, he says himself, the person that I have an issue with is Red-Haired Shanks, because he's the one who stole the fruit. Now Luffy wears the same hat, and now he has the devil fruit. That's the person that I should be upset at. How he speaks is a bit weird because he speaks as if he didn't see him do it, right? Like his process of elimination is like Luffy has it, he wears the straw hat, so obviously he has a connection to Shanks, not like, hey, I fought Shanks, so obviously he's the one that I have to blame. It's kind of like process of elimination as opposed to firsthand experience, right? So I'm like, did he not notice Lucky Roo or no Lucky Roo? Because in Lucky Roo's Vivid card, as I mentioned, it said that him specifically took the fruit. But I really like Jinbei asking that question. So you're telling me you have a problem with Luffy, right? It's almost like Ace, when Ace met Blackbeard and Blackbeard is talking about Luffy. He's like, wait, so you want to capture Luffy? He's like, yeah. He's like, that's my younger brother. He said, oh. I think Who's Who is very skilled, clearly, right? With his techniques, how he's getting through Jinbei's shark skin. He's doing a lot of advanced techniques to get through it. But I think even with everything he was doing, Jinbei was just a little better. But I think for Who's Who, he adopted some of the people that he's been around so much. Like, he's not just like Rob Lucci, but he says some snide things, some disrespectful things, or some remarks that you question, okay, you're an asshole. Him saying to Jinbei that I didn't think a slimy fishman could move that fast on land. And Jinbei responds like, okay, what do you want me to say to that? Like, things like that, discrimination, discriminatory remarks, those things are not generally accepted anymore. You're basically discriminating against fishermen in 2021. We don't do that anymore. And Who's Who just laughs like, my bad. Almost as if to say, yeah, sure, whatever, bro. You're focusing on the wrong things. I'm just saying you're fat. Well, I guess. I think that's what he's saying, right? The really important thing Who's Who mentioned as well is the Sun God, which he talked about him being in jail, and that while being in jail, slaves in the ancient times, they believed in someone that would come and bring laughter and bring aid to them, and he would free them from their suffering. And Who's Who said he was forced to believe in that because he was enslaved or he was captured. So Who's Who made a certain leap in which he said, well, you led the Sun Pirates, right? And for the Sun God, you should know something about it, right? It's a massive leap, I think. But since he had Jinbei in front of him, hey, why not ask the question? I mean, I believe in that, right? The worst somebody can say is no. Just ask. I think Who's Who's entire dialogue is something that, is really interesting and I would like to hear more about, but it's like he's fitting bits and pieces together while not giving us the entire story, because he mentioned the guard and the guard escaping. Now we're like, okay, or the guard disappearing rather. Now we're like, who the hell is the guard, right? But of course, eventually he gets overwhelmed by Jinbei, and Jinbei is one of the few people that I've seen use full body armor and haki and succeed and seemingly win this fight. I think the fight could be over, we don't know yet, but shout out to Jinbei again. Granted, this chapter was really good. I mean, the theories from this chapter are going to revolve around the Sun God. Now, people have referenced chapter 287 in Skypiea when the Sun God is mentioned. People talk about Mother Carmel praying to the Sun God, right? And when you try to put things together, people say Joy Boy, Sun God, all this, it comes together, it makes sense, but we don't know for sure. Could the Sun God and Joy Boy be the same thing? Possibly, but it's hard to say because the Sun God is going to bring joy, right, and save people. Joy Boy essentially is doing the same thing. I think Oda's setting up for the end game. I think it's pretty clear what Oda is doing here. He's giving us bits and pieces of end game material. Not going to focus too much on Luffy's destiny or Luffy being the chosen one, etc. It's obvious, right? Luffy's the person that's destined to do great things. Now it's up to him and his choices how it's going to affect the world, right? Very good chapter. Very good chapter. Very important chapter. Not more important than the last chapter, I think, but I think maybe in hindsight it might be. The Sun God and what it represents could be important to the point that we're like, wow, we found out that this is a relevant topic, a relevant thing that obviously is going to go forward in the story and be a huge part of it in chapter 1018. Guys, give me your thoughts. Make sure to like the video if you did. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Follow me on Instagram at B.D.A. Thank you to my patrons. I appreciate you guys so much. Guys, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
I start doubting me, I felt lost. I rewrite it.